introduction.
Hello and welcome to Dark Alignment Podcast. I'm Brittney.
And I'm Eruca Rose.
And we are so happy to be here, and we together are Dark Alignment Podcast. So, I know it's been a minute since we've been able to record. We've had a lot of life happening.
It's always life. It's weird.
It's always life. I created a whole...
Life?
Yeah, every time. I created a whole entire human. So I have a baby now, and recording time has been very hard, trying to figure all that out. She's getting a little bit bigger. It's getting a little bit easier. So we are going to have more regular episodes. We just can't commit to any sort of a real schedule right now. So it's just going to be a whenever we can make it happen.
Mm-hmm. I think we're aiming for a monthly episode right now.
Yep.
Just so you guys have that in mind, and we don't get any weird comments anymore.
Yeah.
Y'all, we got some people that don't normally come in and be mad that we weren't posting. I'm like, why don't you comment when we are posting? Why don't you be supportive?
I mean, we're doing our best.
When it's actually happening.
We really do appreciate your patience, and we appreciate all the support, and you guys can stay connected with us. You can follow us on social media. We're on every single platform under Dark Alignment. You can follow us individually to see what's going on in our lives. We always love connecting with you guys. So just again, we're so happy you're here, and we are still on season 4, which has been, this is our longest season.
4-4.
4-4.
For 2024.
Boom. Exactly. So this is season 4, episode 4, and we're covering a really interesting case. We actually polled you guys on our Instagram to see what story you wanted to hear, and we have gone with the Craigslist killer. So Philip Markoff. This is a really wild story, so buckle up.
I'm
for
excited.
That. It's going to be good. Trigger warning. We are going to be talking about some pretty graphic crimes today. There are some different types of violence that may be triggering to some people. So please be informed and aware. If you're sensitive to those things, then this podcast is probably not going to be for you. But for everybody else who is ready to go on a journey with us, let's make it happen. So
let's make it happen.
I'm going to start off with my sources, and y'all, I've had some interesting feedback about sources in our comments too. I do not just use Wikipedia. I'm just a fan of Wikipedia. So I'm going to go through all of them. Wikipedia, biography.com, The Craigslist Killer, which was a Lifetime movie starring Jake McDorman, who was in, fun fact, he was in Bring It On 3, the one that has Hayden Panettiere in it. He plays the crappy boyfriend in that one, so it's all I could think about. Every time I watch Bring It On, I'm like, hey, the Craigslist killer. So it's fun to merge those two. And also I had to buy that movie for $10.99 on Amazon, which just, if you want to go watch it, that's you have to pay for it. Crimemuseum.com, Beyond the Headlines, Catching the Craigslist Killer, which is a documentary on Hulu. The CBS 7 Days of Rage coverage on the Craigslist killer. So lots of different sources for one episode. It's not just Wikipedia. Just so we're all clear on that.
Everybody knows.
Just so everybody knows, because I got so much negative feedback from that, which was really interesting to me. We are not going to be able to purchase a research professional on this podcast. Me as a mother, I have a full-time job outside of this. I'm doing the best I can. Okay, I'm getting lots of sources. So here we are. Sometimes there is conflicting information. I try to just point that out whenever I see that, and we try to really hone in on the research that pertains to the astrology. So we are focusing very much on psychology, how someone grew up, family relationships, other relationships and dynamics, and kind of their pathway into criminality. These are the things that we want to look at, that we can see on a chart. So sometimes I might totally skip something that happened because I don't think it's relevant to the astrology. So just pointing that out here too. So, overview for those of you who've never heard of this case. Basically, a preppy, clean-cut medical student turned out to be a sadistic killer hiding in plain sight. On the surface, he lived a very normal life. He was planning a wedding with his longtime girlfriend, fiance, and fellow medical student, Megan McAllister. His crimes were very shocking. It kind of reminds me of Ted Bundy because he had a very disarming appearance. That was one of the things that victims came forward and said over and over, I just would have never thought he would hurt me. He just looked so harmless. He just looked so normal and regular. He also had... Yeah, regular. He just looked like a regular guy, just like a college guy.
I just like describing people as regular. I think it's so funny.
Yeah, well,
it's a funny word.
He was about as regular appearing as you can imagine. Just very average, very...
I saw his pictures, he did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like just...
I'll try to put a picture up here for y'all.
Yeah, imagine it. I'm
gonna try to put more visuals for everyone this year.
Everyone who's watching YouTube, we are gonna get visuals on point this year. That's our resolution for us.
And we're trying to do more with our backdrop. Maybe you guys could send us some fan art or something to put back here.
Fan art. We would proudly display fan art. So if you have artistic gifts and would like to...
Make us look good.
Yeah, sure. we will appreciate that. And for those of you who are only listening on audio, just like use your imagination. Just imagine like the fanciest backdrop you've ever seen. So,
it's not perfect, but it's better.
So a big part of why this case got so much publicity again was the way Philip looked. He didn't look like a typical criminal, like kind of the guy next door. He was tall, he was blonde, he was conventionally handsome, but he victimized 3 women in just like less than a week, which is kind of insane. It was a very rageful...
I was wondering if it was...
It's a short timeline. No, but if he hadn't gotten caught, I think he would have continued, but he was so sporadic with these crimes and it just was like all at one time. He wasn't an experienced criminal.
Gotcha.
Thank goodness he didn't have time to develop those skills, and the technology really got him caught. So we're going to kind of dive into it now. We're going to talk about young Philip. Who was this guy? So Philip Haynes, which is a really interesting middle name, Haynes Markoff. Mm-hmm. He was born February 12th, 1986 in, I think it's pronounced Sherrill, New York. Mm-hmm. Sherrill. I didn't look up the pronunciation, I'm not going to lie. I didn't take the time to do that. I apologize for you Sherrill or Sherrill natives who are upset by my mispronunciation. Apologies in advance. So his father was a dentist, so that's a fun fact. Mm-hmm. From what I could find, his mother had been an educator at some point, but later became a casino worker. I wish I could have found more out there because I thought that was kind of interesting. He also had an older brother and a younger sister. She was actually his half-sister. The younger half-sister alludes to a divorce between his parents. But
I knew it. Okay, go ahead.
I couldn't find much about that, so maybe we can see more on the chart and kind of speculate, because I really wasn't able to find a whole lot of info there.
I was really excited to hear his early life part.
I wish I could have found more details, and again, like, it's one of those cases where it was big at the time, but there's still just not a lot of information about his personal background, how he grew up, and I dug everywhere I could. That was one of the areas I always really like to find out about, because the young life, you do see risk factors, and we often see the same risk factors over and over in every case that we cover.
A lot of common themes.
Yeah, a lot of common themes, so I always feel like it's really important to look at that and point it out, and we can see it on the chart as well. So, again, the way things correlate, very important. So, but by all accounts, he did have a happy and pretty good upbringing. The Lifetime movie makes it seem like he has a strained relationship with his mother specifically, and I can't find any solid info to support that, but the way it's portrayed, I'm assuming they had to do a lot of research to put that out, you know, like if you're doing somebody's story, obviously
somebody must have kind of known something.
Right. Obviously it's dramatized, but still they did make that a point in the Lifetime movie version of it, that there was some strain with the mother. In school, Philip excelled. He participated in lots of extracurricular activities. He was described by teachers as cooperative, friendly, and an excellent student. He was on the bowling team, the youth court, and he was a member of the National Honor Society. And his peers described him as being a little dorky. So kind of a nerd, very intelligent guy. Like no blatant red flags going on. Nobody growing up said, oh, I always knew he was kind of weird, and I always knew he was going to hurt someone. You hear that sometimes from people.
But not him.
No, everybody was very shocked. Friends did describe him as being a little socially awkward with women. A former friend talked about a time where she rejected his physical advances and he reacted aggressively. And she felt that was very out of character. She was really shocked by that. So rejection clearly was something that triggered him.
Wow.
That's interesting. So I guess, according to her, he shoved her against the wall and tried to kiss her. And she tried to push him away. And another male friend had to pull him off of her. So he went from like unassuming, like trusted friend, kind of awkward, nerdy guy to very aggressive really quickly. And yeah, seemed very out of character. So do you want to touch on some young life?
I do. I just want to check. When we look at his chart, we have him as February 12th, 1986. I'm double checking on your notes too.
Yep.
So we have the same thing. There was no birth time listed. Wasn't able to find anyone who had a birth time or a suggested time of day or anything. So I went with the noon chart for Cheryl, New York. That puts him as an Aquarius sun in the 10th house, with a big stellium on it, a big conjunction on it. Moon in Aries. We have the murder moon.
That murder moon. There it is again. We need to just like plot how many murder moons we've had on this podcast because we see it so much, especially with that aggression.
We have Mercury, Pisces, and Mercury and Pisces.
I love it.
We have Venus in Aquarius. We have Mars in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn in Sagittarius. I took my notes different this time, so sorry if I'm wording things weird.
What's interesting, I have so many similar placements. I also have my Mercury in Pisces. I have my Venus in Aquarius. I have my Saturn in Sagittarius. Like, that's really fascinating to me.
Well, some of it is because you were born around the same year.
Right. I was born almost a year to the day after him.
Yeah, so a lot of these planets hadn't moved much.
But Mercury
did.
Had, so.
Mercury went all the way around. Probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with this murder moon situation. Aries moons are adventure-seeking. They're spontaneous. They're self-starting. Passionate, very reactive, sometimes combative, which we definitely see gets triggered with him. With a lot of these people that end up on our podcast, they definitely got the combative part going, and very driven energy as well. Being the youngest sign of the zodiac, there is always this kind of youthful quality to them. It's almost like it can get to be a little Peter Pan syndrome-y, I think.
Ooh.
Like, especially with his other placements. I'm kind of getting that vibe. Like, especially if he hadn't gotten much experience romantically.
Right.
And then when getting older and then not having developed that part of his life and just getting angry about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. That's the vibe
I'm getting. Yeah, so it can be a nice thing. Like, you could bring a fresh, young energy to things you're doing with people, or it can kind of go the other way. The big issue with this is that they'll process their feelings through this place of passion and fire and anger. So there's just most feelings turn into this like weird anger mixed with the actual feeling situation. I've got an Aries moon daughter now.
Yep.
And it's weird. It's odd to me how many things just like get her fired up. Like, she's happy about something, she's excited, she's also kind of mad. She's embarrassed, she's also mad. She's sad, she's also mad. She's mad, she's also mad. It's like
I was wondering if you were going to talk about
just
that.
a little bit there.
Yeah.
It was surprising to me. I feel like I've been around a lot of kids, and it's just a unique energy for sure.
Speak on it. You can definitely speak to this energy.
She wants mom. She's also mad and doesn't want mom. So it's a lot. He does have this placement conjunct Eris, which is this really focused on a revolutionary energy, wanting to stir things up for like making things better in the long run. It's kind of also aggressive, but it's usually kind of focused more on the collective. So we see him not afraid to go against society.
Ooh, we're going to see this a little bit, which is kind of interesting. A lot in his career, which is funny because he has a son in the 10th house. So you see it a lot where he's in the medical field, but he's constantly challenging his educators. Like, he's always like coming up with something kind of new and different.
He's probably kind of a know-it-all.
Yes, very.
That was something that I was talking to my son about last night. He helped me look at the chart last night.
I love it.
He's so intuitive. He was like picking up on stuff before I even told him what it was.
I love that.
Yeah, so this is a very brash, impulsive place for the moon to be, and it's entirely connected to how he processes his feelings, So it's a lot. There's, let's see, I'm trying to decide how much of this I want to go over right now. There's the Aquarius part. It's like a 10th house stuff happening. There's so much in the 10th house and in Aquarius that has the Sun there, Jupiter there, Venus there, and then Pisces right over, or Mercury right over the line in Pisces. That's the same one I keep mixing up for some reason today, isn't it? It's hitting me.
And
I think Pisces Mercury is trying to confuse me.
As a person who has a natal placement that is that Pisces Mercury,
Yes.
I like to describe it as like you're a camera lens and someone has smeared Vaseline over it, and it's just like all skewed and weird and doesn't. So I feel like that is happening. What's happening.
That's what's happening to me.
That's what's happening to you. You're getting Pisces Mercury really hard in the face. Okay.
Y'all handle it with ease, though. I don't know.
No, we don't know what we're talking about. That's what it is. We make it look easy because we're also confused. It's fine.
Well, midheaven and Aquarius. This is where what he's going to be known for. Having his Sun there really makes it. It's kind of a fame placement, especially in Aquarius, online. Things to do with the internet, things to do with the collective, the World Wide Web. I think it's very kind of Capricorn Aquarius. So seeing that there lines up with what he's known for very well. His Venus is here as well, which I think plays into him not really coming off as someone who would do something like this. These people can be recognized kind of for their good looks, their charm, their loving manner. Like, I think that kind of plays into the way he's seen before people knew the things he did. He could probably kind of play it off. I think sometimes people with these like really prominent in-your-face Venus placements can hide a lot behind them. Like Venus first house people, I think a lot about them. And then once I get to know them, like, oh.
That's what that is.
I thought something was off. But that might just be me. I don't know. So, anyway, I think this is like that, but on a grand scale with society, with the 10th house, public life, very 10th house. Let's see. They can also seem like they're married to their work, like their heart is invested in what their like goals are. So some people say that can even take a toll on like their actual relationships because they're so invested in their work. Let's see. But they're good at organizing social events and stuff like that. Like, he's good at probably organizing these people on Craigslist to come get murdered.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much here in this part of the chart. I just want y'all to remember this for later. Because I've also looked at the death chart already. I just want you guys to really remember this part of the chart.
Spoiler alert. Philip Markoff is deceased, so there will be a death chart. So, yep, there we go.
There will be a death chart. Could have been someone else's death chart. Let's see. As far as early life, I remember what I was going to say right there. When I was talking to my son about his chart, I mentioned the 10th house was in Aquarius, and then my son goes, "Oh, like he's known for being smart." And I was like,
that kid
"That's
is too
weird
smart.
You said that."
That kid is way too smart. He was absolutely known for that.
So I was like, "Yeah, Code, I was about to mention that." I was like, 10th house Aquarius people are not known for being stupid unless they just have such eccentric ideas. People are like upset about it. Like, these are going to be very individualistic, known for being individualistic, known for likely also being intelligent, and maybe kind of forward thinking in general.
Yeah.
It just sounds like he was.
He was.
He also had a lot in Sagittarius, so I think that kind of plays into this. Invested in higher education, like you mentioned, he was doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think I might leave it there. Maybe we talk about.
We're about to get into romance. So.
Okay.
Does that help?
What do I need to think? What do I need to say before we talk about romance? There's something I think you all need to know before we talk about his relationships. Okay. If you all remember an episode a while back when we talked about Mars conjunct Saturn, and how this is like a cruel, evil king dictator vibe. That's what we have happening again with him.
I can't remember who had that.
I can't remember who either, but I know we had it because I went back and found like the same phrasing I used back then.
Right.
So I wanted to refer to it. I should have looked and saw which episode it was. But he has Mars, Saturn, and Juno in Sagittarius all on top of each other, and then Uranus right next to it in the 7th house. But Mars, Saturn, and Juno are in the 6th house. It's construction and action. Construction being like that, like building, Saturn, climbing our mountain energy, and then action being very much the Mars placement. It can be very cruel, it can be like a dictator, forceful, very aggressive. Obsessions get very strong with this, especially anything to do with relationships, because it is, or anything with commitment, because it has to do with his Juno placement as well. Let's see. This might have been something to do with the split from his parents, seeing a divorce the way he did, and all these oppositions to his Chiron and Pallas and rising over across the chart in Gemini. But this ultimately makes him a very calculating, dominant type person. Saturn really has a very cold influence on the fiery Mars placement, where it just becomes so stressful for me to try to feel into.
Wow.
They can kind of put their feelings on mute for the time being while they're like, there's this like restricting action and they're getting fired up at the same time, and they almost nearly cancel each other out, but in this like really freaky way. I just it freaks me out. There's kind of this emotional rationalization, especially with his Pallas across the chart opposing this. Pallas has a lot to do with long-term planning. You could say scheming if you wanted to, especially in this context. There's a theme of overcompensating with dominance here, feeling like they have earned the right to be in charge. They need to be in charge.
It can be chills.
It's a sense of like achievement at the same time. This power and control, and like there's goals behind it. Like it's very gross to me. Recognition and respect from their actions. That's their kind of the goal there, but it can turn really twisted really easily with these type of placements, and with all the squares, his is kind of debilitated. Let's see. This leads to this kind of hints at this deep-seated insecurity and narcissism most often. Repressed anger can come through this very often as well. If you have a placement like this and you don't want to be a murderer, some of the tips that I've seen for this placement, like managing this energy in a healthy way, would be vigorous, strenuous exercise, something that you could do and that you could have goals for over time. Let's see, this could also be a hint at some really intense BDSM, but I think his goes past that into being just abuse.
Right. It's not consensual.
No,
that's
this is next level.
It's not consensual, so it's doesn't fall into the BDSM category.
No, I think he blew past that category.
Right.
He could be very easily triggered with this type of placement. Unwarranted authority, attitude, God complex, superiority complex. Saturn can hurt the ability to take action at times, like injuries, insecurities, kind of just like piling up, and then he gets more mad. And let's see. There's Uranus here as well, and I wanted to touch on that for a second. It adds this element of eccentricity and unpredictability to this part of his self. When you've got this much of an intense placement already, and then to have Uranus on top of it makes it really spontaneous, really chaotic.
That tracks.
Yeah, especially with the Uranus being right over in the 7th house, anything to do with partnerships or relationships, and anything that would be a mirror to himself. And a lot of times I think the mirrors for the killers are the victims in a way.
Right.
Juno here, it makes the dynamic more intense in commitment and relationships. So I just want to say that again before we talk about relationships.
Yep, this is good. This is good because we'll talk all about, are we ready to dive into relationships? So now we've looked at the chart. Let's kind of see what tracks here. So after he graduated high school in 2004, Philip attended NYU, where he received a bachelor's degree in biology. So studied similar things to you.
Great.
At this time, he also met his future fiance, fellow pre-med student that I mentioned earlier, Megan McAllister. My heart really goes out to her as we continue through this. Like, she's really tried to stay out of the public eye, and I want to be as respectful as possible to her for everything she went through. I can't even imagine how horrible this all was for her. But she was described as sweet, introverted, and quiet. She was a senior while Philip was a sophomore. So there's a tiny age gap, which is interesting to have the female be older than the male. I feel like we don't see that as often in relationships. So I found that fascinating. They met doing volunteer work at a nearby medical center emergency room. So they meet under this guise of like, we're both giving back, we're both serving the community, we're both kind of have this in common, we're both in the medical field. So they're really connecting over the things that the interests that they share. So they started dating shortly after that. They had their first date a few months after meeting. Their first date, I have a date on that. November 11th, 2005 was their first date, if we ever want to look at that. They got engaged 3 years later, so they dated for quite a while, and their wedding was set for August 14th, 2009 in Long Branch, New Jersey. So we have a lot of, if we ever want to pull, like, maybe we'll do that for Patreon.
Yeah,
pull some specific dates to look at. It was supposed to be a sunset ceremony on the beach at a resort. And she hadn't really dated anybody before him, so she didn't really have much experience as far as relationships. And she was head over heels for Philip. We all remember that, like, first love, the first time that you felt those feelings. So once they both completed their undergrad in 2007, they moved to Boston, and they were both going to medical school and residing in Quincy, Massachusetts. So spring of 2009, things start to take a dark turn. Megan went out of town to be with her parents for a week in mid-April, and that's when literally all hell broke loose. So we're going to, I guess, jump right into his
bad boy behavior.
Bad boy behavior is the name of this section, unless you have anything else about relationships.
I could talk about his trauma a little bit.
Okay. I mean, I feel like we'll get into, it'll probably really show in his behavior. So if you want to touch on that really quick before we dive into, because this next section is much longer, where we talk about his crimes. Even though it's through a very short window, we have tons
of detail.
We have tons of details about this, which this is the most detailed area that we have, because Young Life don't have much. There's just the one relationship to talk about. So
yes. Yeah, and I think with his Young Life, when I was looking at the chart, having Pallas in your first house in Gemini feels kind of harsh. If that is his chart time, we're kind of looking at the noon chart here. But when we get over to the 4th house noon chart, I mean, this Ceres retrograde placement with a ton of squares on it, like, I just think that no matter where this ends up on his chart, it is very harsh, harsh growing up energy. We have Pluto on the South Node, which is also very harsh on his past. And then his North Node has Pholus on it, so it's like harsh past, excessive future. Let's see, Saturn, Mars, Juno, like we talked about again, very hard. And the thing about it is the Pallas, the Gemini placements, being Chiron, the rising, and Pallas, and the Sagittarius placements, being Uranus, Juno, Saturn, and Mars, are both squaring off to Ceres retrograde in Virgo. And I think a troublesome Ceres placement in Virgo would feel like very critical, very harsh. home life. Like when you're most comfortable, you're being like beaten down. Like I just don't feel like that's very good. Feels very rough. The Chiron squaring off with Ceres, like in Gemini, they wear many faces. Speech issues, dyslexia, issues with early education, anything that would make it more stressful for him to express himself in general falls under that category with Gemini. Health issues with the vocal cords, shoulders, arms, hands, respiratory system. Let's see. And I think there had to have been a lot of stress in the home and a lot of really divisive, we have to make a decision about this or that right now because of these little details, really picking everything apart, blowing up, chaotic, unpredictable with the Uranus square, and all of this making it like where he can't feel like he's being himself. So I just so much.
Are we ready to see how that kind of plays into exactly what he did?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you'll probably have a lot more to say after hearing this. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and put the trigger warning. Once again, this is where we are going to get into the details of what he did. He was very violent physically and violent sexually. So we're going to have to talk about that. So just warning to any sensitive viewers out there.
That was my other thing. I was like, this chart looks like there could have been some essay.
Yeah.
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 When he was younger.
Yeah. Oh, wow. He was victimized?
I mean, it
looks like, or
at some point in his life, whether he's the one doing it or...
Okay.
A lot of times those placements end up looking very similar on the chart, where like...
just at some point
they are being victimized or victimizing someone else in that way. It's a theme.
So, bad boy behavior. Here we go. So, the crime spree, once again, was very short-lived. And with today's technology, there's no telling how much damage he would have done if he had been born in a different time. Like, if he had had more avenues than just Craigslist. Because, again, this was like 2009, 2008. Yeah. This was right before... You know, there was social media, but things just weren't.
It wasn't like now.
You didn't have it on your phone necessarily back then, or they were just starting to come out with smartphones. Like, this was all a transition time of technology. Like, now things really haven't changed much in the last decade or so with technology and how it works. Like, we've all known about that for quite some time now. But, yeah, this was a turning point where technology was really taking off. So, like, nobody really, I don't think, uses Craigslist much anymore. And this was a main avenue at the time. So, technology was the avenue for these crimes to happen. I don't know that he would have been a killer without it. If he had been born in 20 years sooner, if he had ever found an avenue to really act out this darkness. It's very Aquarius themes with how the crimes were committed. So it's like the use of technology to facilitate that, which is interesting. Especially seeing he had like stellium energy going on
a lot happening in Aquarius. And I think he likes that element of separation a little bit.
Yeah. The anonymity. Yeah, absolutely. So these allegations were never confirmed, but the potential motive for his crimes was that he had gambling issues and needed to pay off some debts. So that's one, keep that in mind as we go through this. That's one theory on why. A lot of people just wanted to know why.
A Pisces placement with an addiction?
What? That's crazy. That's crazy. So, in his free time, Philip was said to have enjoyed staying up all night playing poker with his friends. He had a reputation...
Cool.
You do what?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Oh. He had a reputation for being a serious player who, by all accounts, did not take losing lightly. Very competitive. It was said that he was around $13,000 in debt, which is pretty serious for a young person who's like a college student. Like, a college student typically doesn't have that kind of money to be throwing away with gambling. It's also very clear that there was a sadistic sexual component going on as well. So it started when he answered an ad on Craigslist. He agreed to meet up with an escort, And there's a conflict on what her name was. I've seen it listed 2 different ways. Tina or Trisha Leffler.
Okay.
I've seen both names in multiple sources, so calling that out as something I could not nail down as to what her true name is. Maybe that's good. We don't want to drudge up anything for her, but he meets up with an escort at a local hotel on April 10th, 2009. She did an interview. She has gone public about the attack, and in the interview she said that he sounded really nice over the phone. He only wanted an hour with her, which would be $200. He said that was fine. Everything seemed like business as usual for her as an escort. Nothing, no red flags were, you know, when you work in that industry, you tend to know when to pick up red flags. Like you're starting to see a pattern, or you know when you get a gut feeling like, ooh, I probably shouldn't.
Venus conjunct the sun and Mercury.
Yeah.
He sounds so nice.
He sounds so nice. And after Philip entered the room, she was, this is trigger warning, this is where there's some SA going on. She was bound, gagged, and robbed at gunpoint. So he ended up stealing her debit card and $800 in cash. He made her lay down on the floor and put her hands behind her back. From there, he zip-tied her hands. She said his demeanor was shockingly calm during the robbery as well, and he also grabbed her phone out of her purse and erased the call history. She cooperated. She did everything he said because he had a gun, and he didn't leave right away either. He kind of took his time, which I find pretty interesting. And at this point, she says that she saw him take her underwear from her suitcase and put it in his pocket. Then he made her go into the bathroom where he tied her up more. She's already zip tied, but he actually physically ties her up and he duct tapes her mouth shut. She could hear him from the bathroom. She could hear him rummaging around the hotel room. He came and checked her restraints one more time, and then he leaves the room. So it's a very weird encounter. He goes straight from hi, you know, casual interaction to aggressive, dominant, forceful, taking control of the situation, taking physical control of her. So she frees herself.
If you are in Northwest Arkansas and looking for affordably priced photography and videography services, then you should definitely reach out to Nice NWA.
Yes, you should.
With photo sessions starting at $100, now is a great time to update your company's headshots, get graduation photos, new family pictures, and more. Looking for video work instead?
Yes, videos start at just $300 and are a great way to boost your marketing engagement online with current customers and potential new customers. It's also a great way to create highlight reels of your next event or just to tell your story in an exciting and creative way. Nice is not just locally owned and operated, but is also a certified minority and veteran-owned business that started right here in Northwest Arkansas in 2017.
So, go check them out on Facebook or on Instagram at NiceNWA or by visiting their website at nicenwa.com.
She freed herself from the restraints. She made her way to a neighboring hotel room. She called the cops because he cut the phone line to the room, which is another interesting tidbit, because she had a cell phone. He knew she had a cell phone. He erased the cell phone, but then cuts the phone. I don't know. That part doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, as like he was just trying. It doesn't seem very well thought out.
No.
In that regard, but everything else seems very well planned. He brought the restraints with him. He brought a gun with him. He knew he wanted to rob her and just to dominate her. Not even with, there was no sexual activity at all, which I'm very glad for her that it didn't turn out that way. It's still extremely traumatic. So all of this happens, and then 4 days later, on April 14th, he answered another Craigslist ad offering erotic massage services, and he agreed to meet a woman named Julissa Brisman at a different hotel in the Boston area. So this is all happening in the same area around 10 p.m. She was a former party girl who had recently gotten sober. She was pursuing a career in acting and modeling. She was really excited about her life. Everybody who knew her said that she just was kind of making a turn. She was still doing some escort type work, the massages. She was still, doing some of those things, but had really made very positive changes in her life. She had aspirations of becoming a drug and alcohol counselor one day.
Wow.
So she really wanted to use her experiences to help other people. She sounds like a wonderful, wonderful girl, but sadly, that dream was never realized. The bills needed to be paid, and that's why she was doing sex work to make ends meet. She was 26 years old. She was still 25. This all happened a week before her birthday. Really, really sad. She was found unconscious with multiple gunshot wounds at the hotel later that evening. She had 3 shots to the head and 3 to the abdomen. So it's 6 gunshot wounds in total. That's somebody who opened fire on her, absolutely opened fire on her. She also had multiple blows to the head from the butt of the gun. She was still alive. They transferred her to Boston Medical Center, and then she died from her injuries. So this was actually the same hospital where Philip Markoff volunteered, where she ends up going. So that's, I have chills saying that. Gross. Okay. So police say the confrontation between the victim and her killer seemed to have begun as an attempted robbery, just like the first attack was a robbery where the victim complied. So this ended where it looked like she clearly fought back. This was a girl who is changing her life. She's working hard for her money. She's trying to make ends meet. Somebody's trying to rob her. She's like, no, not today. Fights back. Ultimately ends up losing her life as a result, which is just so sad. My heart goes out to her family and friends who were watching her improve, and then losing her like this is really terrible. So people who knew her said she was a really tough girl. They weren't surprised that she tried to fight back. It was also noted that she was bound with zip ties as a form of restraint. So again, that's his methodology. It's tying back. That's things that they're going to connect later in the attacks, with them being so close together in the same city. Craigslist was involved, the same type of victim. Everything's kind of falling in line where they're like, this has to be the guy that was just reported from this other attack. So they're already on high alert. Like, police are already starting to connect the dots here. But she was discovered lying in the doorway of her room, and an eyewitness in a neighboring room heard the commotion, saw Jaleesa's body halfway out the door, and called security right away. Hotel surveillance videos show a tall, clean-cut, young, blonde man in a black windbreaker, matching Philip's description, leaving the property. This all happened right around the time of the Boston Marathon, too, so there were tons of people in town that weren't normally there, more tourism, the hotels were more packed than normal. Citizens were definitely scared when the news hit, and the police jumped straight into action, which was great. 2 days after killing Jaleesa, Philip responds to another Craigslist ad. So we're seeing this go on, and he's just kind of on a rampage here. This time the victim's name was Cynthia Melton. She was an exotic dancer from Vegas, offering lap dances and services on site. So Philip agreed to meet her at a Holiday Inn, this time in Rhode Island. So he changed cities this time. That's interesting. He was smart in that way, where he knew, okay, I've already committed 2 crimes in one area. I committed a murder. Time to switch gears and find a new place. So he chose to travel about 60 miles away for this one. So he knew the investigation was heating up. After he committed a homicide, he starts suddenly being a little bit more careful in where he is going to, do these attacks. So on the way to the hotel, this is not smart. For a smart guy, this next move, not smart. On the way to the hotel, he stops at a Walmart and he uses a stolen credit card from his first victim. Wow. Trisha or Tina, not sure, Leffler's stolen credit cards, and he uses this to buy a baseball cap, his disguise. That's all. That's literally the whole disguise. He's so cocky that he's like, I'll just put on a hat. It's fine. So he got to her room just before 11 p.m. She said that he was young and professional looking. She let him in the door. So she's scanning him before allowing him into the room. Her defenses are down. She's thinking, like, no problem. Because of his clean-cut, preppy appearance. Again, his appearance is being used to his advantage to gain trust.
Yep.
So
he's Venus.
He's visibly disarming. Visibly very disarming. Right away, as soon as they're in the room, he pulls a gun. He demands money. So robbery seems to be like the main motive each time, along with just the control and there's obviously a sexual component to it because he's choosing sex workers every time as well. So whether or not he's actually acting out sexually, he is selecting a certain type of victim. There's something about that that is sexually gratifying for him. Like, we see that over and over, even if it's just the control and the binding. it plays into this whole thing. So she screams, and he tells her to shut up and follow instructions. Once again, finds her hands behind her back. He searched the room. He asked where her laptop was. She said she didn't have one, and he threatened to kill her if he found one. So he was, using intimidation. She was so lucky because her husband was traveling with her, and he was down in the lobby while all of this is happening. And a lot of sex workers have done that, in the past, where if they're going out for a job, they're not just going to be alone. They've got a trusted friend, they've got their spouse, their partner, somebody in either the adjacent hotel room or at the property, and there's like a time limit, so if something goes wrong, they know to step in, or there's a signal, and in this case, they had a safety signal. So he was standing by just like waiting for that check-in, and when he didn't receive that, he went up to the room with his key, opens the door, sees his wife bound on the floor, and Philip is there with a gun. So the husband went into the hallway. Philip followed him, and they ran in opposite directions. So once he got disturbed and disrupted in the middle of it, he bails. Because he knows, he's completely fucked at this point. So Cynthia immediately called hotel security, realized this was the same guy who committed the crimes in Boston. It was all put together.
Wow.
He did get away, but she survived. And once again, he's on the hotel surveillance cameras in the stairwell and the lobby. So when he's entering and when he's leaving, they have all of his build, makeup. The police are able to say, okay, now he's moving to a different city. That makes it even scarier.
Yeah.
That he's starting to travel. It's not just the Boston area. He's willing to travel to commit these crimes.
I feel like his mindset must have been like, well, I'm already people probably on my tail. I might as well keep doing what I want to do until I can't anymore.
Right.
And as far as the surveillance cameras go, like in 2009, so places had them, but not every place. And I know a lot of places had them, like they didn't work, but they had them up there for show.
Yep. And of course, it wasn't hard for law enforcement to put all this together because modern technology. Hello. Yeah. The police immediately suspected that the 3 crimes, close in time, similar in many ways, were committed by the same person. They have the surveillance footage. They have confirmed cell phone activity. They have email evidence to link into all of the crimes. They have several track phones, like burner phones, and pairs of stolen women's underwear. They find all of this, and 2 of them belong to his first victim. She identified him from the surveillance footage, so he gets caught really fast. It is not hard to track him down. IP address tells you exactly where this person is. And I don't think people were as smart about that in 2010.
No, a lot of people didn't know what an IP address was. Right. And I think most people know it.
Now, I mean, it would be like, this is almost 15 years later. We've learned a lot about, and cybercrime.
And just the common knowledge is different. I mean, he was probably smarter than he should have probably known. But,
Yeah, but I really, they released all the videos of him, the surveillance footage on the news, so people were seeing that. But really, it was the email address he used to communicate through Craigslist ended up being the main break. Again, IP address like a computer thumbprint. So it only took them a couple of days to catch him. So do you want to talk anything about crimes before we kind of go into the investigation and trial and all of that?
I just think I keep looking at this Jupiter, Sun, Venus conjunction in Aquarius. He really just had such an expansive presence, especially with how he became known. And how he changed so many people's outlook on the internet and online communities like Craigslist. I think that there's just such an impact that he had through such a vast part of the world. I don't think that people, how many jokes did you hear about anything to do with Craigslist about oh, you're not going to kill me, right? Oh, this isn't, you're not a killer, right? You're not going to murder me because over Craigslist. I think that it just became such a big, well-known thing. And the way that he does appear also with this placement, that Venus, I just keep looking at the Venus placement, or he just seems comes off so nice, everything's chill. And there is a quintile aspect over from where the Venus is, over to the Mars, Saturn, Juno, Uranus part of the chart, Sagittarius, which kind of they makes those parts of his personality work together to come up with creative solutions for the other part. Like, I could very much see like that Mars, Saturn using, finding a creative way to get what it wants through that Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Sun placement, and vice versa. It's very, very manipulative. And then I also don't think I mentioned he has Lilith in Taurus, which squares off with the Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Sun conjunction. It's just such a lustful, rude, I'm gonna get my way, no budging type of manipulation that comes out of that type of Lilith placement. There's so much here.
Yeah. Okay, we can go back into this and let you. There's so many.
Yes.
So many things. I think this next section we go into the investigation, and it all keeps.
Do you want to hear more about this?
It keeps going back to the way he looks and presents, because the police were not expecting it either.
Mm-hmm.
So. He didn't fit the profile that they had imagined on paper, but he did fit the visible description when they saw Philip. They certainly didn't expect a clean-cut, good-looking medical student to be their person.
He just has enough insecurities underneath it all.
And who the fuck did this remind everybody of? Ted Bundy! Because law enforcement couldn't believe such a nice guy. He's a psychology student. He's so intelligent. He's pre-law. He's so clean cut. Like, they don't expect the violence and the types of crimes to happen from these unassuming, visibly nice looking, I'm using air quotes, people could be the guy. And then they have this charm about them too. So it's like, oh, we don't expect that. But of course they had enough evidence to arrest Philip. And they did on April the 20th. While he and his poor fiancée, Megan, were on their way to a casino, Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. So,
remembering Mom.
they had to get him before he left the state, so it was a frantic arrest. When he was pulled over and arrested, Philip didn't ask questions, had nothing to say when the cops seized his vehicle with a warrant. He refused to speak without a lawyer, but Megan had a lot of questions for the officers, rightfully so. She has no idea about any of this. They're about to get married. This is April. Their wedding is planned for August. They're 4 months out from a wedding. And when you're in that wedding planning mode, you are trying to make sure all your ducks are in a row, wedding focus. So, like, I feel like there's some blinders on from that, too, where it's like you're so preoccupied with making sure that you're getting all the details covered as far as a wedding. It's huge. And then your fiance is out doing disgusting stuff, living a total double life. Like, ew. So I'm sure this was extremely traumatic for her. I feel so awful.
Of course, this kind of comes up when he's looking to get married. With the Juno.
And, she was reportedly inconsolable finding out all these details. I can only imagine. I feel like that's an extremely valid response. And on April 21st, so the day after he's arrested, actually, we got conflicting timelines. Another report said June. So one account says it was the very next day. Another says June. I think June is more plausible because he was arraigned for the murder. It takes a little bit more time to file charges and do all those things. You don't typically have an arraignment like the day after you're arrested, but they did have lots of evidence, so I don't know. This case moved really fast. The crime was really fast as well. So interesting Aries season. You feel it like moving very quickly. It does move into Taurus at this point, the sun anyway. So as for the physical evidence, the prosecutor stated that there was a semi-automatic 9mm handgun inside a hollowed out medical book that he had. So he went through some he literally carves out a shape to keep a gun in a book. It takes a lot of
time, actually.
Yeah. The level of detail in that is interesting. They also found wrist restraints and duct tape in his apartment. They had fingerprint evidence at the scenes. The aforementioned underwear that he took from his victims, they found those hidden in a sock and placed under his mattress. Still, this asshole pleads not guilty to the crimes. Wasn't me. Somebody else.
They have all this evidence.
So on May 4th, Rhode Island officials issued a warrant for his arrest on the April 16th attack, because we have Boston, Massachusetts, and we have Rhode Island. So we have 2 crimes in Boston, 1 in a different state. So you've got 2 different jurisdictions filing charges against him. So there's a lot going on simultaneously between these 2 departments. So that's where the attempted robbery of Cynthia Melton. The state's attorney general said that their prosecution would have to wait until the Boston charges were resolved, because that's where the homicide, they want to take care of that one first. So there's going to be, again, there's a lot going on all at once. We don't need to get too in the weeds about that. But the trial was expected to begin in July of 2010, but it was delayed until March.
Interesting. So almost back around to Aries Taurus season.
Yep.
Which is where his North Node is. With Bolus, so a lot of that is destiny shit. Yeah.
And now I'm going to switch gears, go back to Megan for a second. It's like, what is she thinking at this point? You know, she's obviously not going to have her wedding.
Yeah.
How devastating is that for a young woman? Her first love, she thought she's found true love, and everything just really falls apart. She leaves for a week, and the whole world falls apart, like around
Literally.
her. I can't even imagine how this had to be like the ultimate having a rug pulled out from under you, like type of feeling.
Also, like, feeling scared, you know? Like, what if I had gone through with this and
well,
I could have been a victim?
Right? Initially, she did believe he was innocent,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was some sort of mistake. Like, they had to make a mistake.
Yeah. Like, this is crazy out of nowhere. Yeah.
To quote her directly, she said, "Philip was beautiful inside and out, and she didn't believe that he was capable of any of this." She also went on the record to say, "I just can only hope that the criminal justice system will not be overwhelmed and persuaded with what is being put forth in the media. My fiance's fate should not rest in the court of public opinion, but rather a court of law." During the times that the crimes were committed, Megan was obviously planning the wedding. She didn't suspect that anything was wrong, but on April 29th, so just 9 days after his arrest, she visited him in jail, and she called off the wedding.
Wow.
So this is, you can imagine more things are getting out in the media.
Yeah.
She's
seeing
the
more of the
evidence.
proof. Yeah.
On June 11th, she visited him a second time and told him that she did not plan to see him again for, quote, a long period of time, if ever. And I'm sure this was just horrific for her. My heart, again, goes out to her. She's truly a victim in this case. He was a manipulative person living a full-on double life. And as the police dug further into his internet history, they learned more and more about his dark sexual fixations. He was distraught after losing Megan, though, and he was placed on suicide watch in prison. So we'll get into that later. Let's see what else you want to say about the investigation.
Oh, man.
We're almost through all of our crime notes here.
Well, I keep looking at the North Node for this area of life. You know, we've talked about his past. A lot of it was just really harsh with Pluto and very threatening in a lot of ways, but more like internalize it in an internalized way with it being retrograde. But then on the North Node side, kind of where he's heading in life, it's got some sextiles up to the conjunction on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces, so it's connected there. It's also trine his Neptune placement, which I don't think I've actually mentioned yet, but that his Neptune is in Capricorn, which would have a lot to do with the way that he is perceiving things and the way that he's being perceived. That Neptune placement squares off with his moon and makes a sextile to of course, the South Node and Pluto, trine over to Ceres. I think it's just all connected. It's like his chart's very much like this web of past shit running into future shit. I don't see anything that's really standing alone. You know, not that anything does actually stand alone on the chart, but some more than others. But really, it's just all very
It's like
intertwined. Yeah. Like I don't think there's not like if I was advising him like one part of his chart that I would be like, all right, we really need to focus on just this and then things will improve. Like, I think it would be addressing everything on the chart the way that it maps out for him. And I'm kind of hesitant to say that, but like that's how I'm looking at it right now. There's this one little aspect that I don't usually talk about on here that's kind of funny for the trials.
Okay.
So there's a semi-square from the North Node over to his part of happiness, the point of happiness. And it's just an Arabic part. It's like he's still striving to make the best out of it all. He's still striving to be happy and have a good time and give himself happiness in his future destiny. He's always striving for happiness. I don't think he's succeeding, but he is. That is what he's really trying to do. He's pining for that happy energy.
Yeah.
But his part of happiness is pretty difficult and stuck in between Chiron retrograde and Pallas in Gemini. So.
Okay. Well,
It's all trauma.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of that is going to come into play with this last little bit. We were going to talk about the theories of his motive and what is speculated there, and then we're going to get into his death and look at the charts there. So for theories of motive, pathological thrill seeker, compulsive gambling corroborates this theory that was the main thing, was the needing a thrill. The robbery and the financial debt, he was $130,000 in student debt and $13,000 in gambling debt. So those were two things that played into the robbery. Was the first thing he wanted to do each time. He was acting out of sexual fantasy, and the burglary was secondary is another theory, because taking the underwear, taking a trophy that is so sexual and choosing victims that work in a sexual field, like that's definitely a component of the fantasy of what he was trying to do.
Very Lilith Taurus, taking the panties.
Right? Oh my gosh. He had his own profile on Craigslist showing that he was seeking sexual encounters and meetups. Many of the chats and attempted meetups were with transgendered people. So he's looking and fantasizing about something that was unconventional for him, probably, and for probably people in his circle. It suggests that he was potentially at war with himself and his desires. So they've speculated that caused a fractured identity for him, kind of being at odds with yourself and your sexuality. I know I've personally dealt with some of that type of, like for me, it's a Venus-Mars square, where I have dealt with something similar to that. So like I understand what that fractured identity is kind
He's
of.
close to having that same
Really?
square, yeah.
His ad that he placed said that he was a sex addict, and he included pictures of his torso and described his physical build. So he's got a lot of that on there. But now we're going to get into his death. So Philip attempted suicide several times during his incarceration, with the first just being 3 days after his arrest. So almost immediately he's trying to escape it. He made a second attempt when Megan broke up with him, and then a third attempt on the day that his wedding was supposed to take place. So I feel like there's a lot of this, like you said, trying to be in this happy place and romanticizing what's going on. And I feel like with him, like suicide was very romanticized, like almost a Romeo Juliet in his mind. Like he's kind of having some delusions about it. So he was placed on suicide watch and in psychiatric hold multiple times, but still, Philip died by suicide on August 15th, 2010, which was 1 year and 1 day after his planned wedding date. So it was like the first anniversary of it came around. The second time it came around, he succeeded in his attempts to end his life. So officers found him dead in his cell, where he had covered himself head to toe with a blanket. Trigger warning, we're going to talk about exact death things right here. He used a knife that he made from a pin and a piece of metal to cut arteries. And of course, he's a medical student. He knows which ones to cut. He cuts arteries in his ankles, legs, and neck. He also swallowed toilet paper and tightened a plastic bag over his head with gauze. Before taking his own life, he wrote Megan's name and their pet names for each other in blood on the cell wall and had photographs of the two of them scattered around him. So he is absolutely reliving and pining for this like happy place. And I feel like wanting to end his life was like maybe hoping he could transcend into this other world where like an alternate reality is what
it seemed like the better option.
That's really what it feels like, just from the details of this. It's also,
I mean, from his perspective, it seemed like the better option.
Right, and he used his medical knowledge to aid in his suicide, knew exactly where to access the main arteries in his body. And in review of his crimes, police say that he had all the markings of a sexual offender without actually sexually assaulting his victims. So it's interesting. At the same time, he kept trophies, underwear to remember them and remember the crimes. It's tragic all around. There was so much evidence that he would have undoubtedly been convicted of first-degree murder. And by all accounts, Megan has done her best to move on with her life after this. And we wish her, all the surviving victims and their families, all the best. Trisha still seems to be coping. She seems to be coping pretty well with all of it from what I've seen of her doing multiple interviews and like being very forthcoming. Julisa's family was still extremely heartbroken. It's just awful. It's a shame that they did not get the true justice in court that those families deserved. I am, for their sake, kind of happy that they didn't have to go through the court proceedings, because sometimes that can be really tough for the victims' families to have to go through months and months and months and hearing all the details and seeing all the pictures and waiting for the jury to make a decision, and sometimes that doesn't go as planned. So, you know, they were spared of that, but they were also not given that opportunity for justice, which is unfortunate. And another tragedy is that Philip had such a promising life, and he threw it all away.
That's a good point, too.
He threw it all away. And after this case, this is a very Aquarius worldwide thing. Craigslist shut down their erotic services section for the entire globe after this happened. So that is my full notes happening.
Man, that's a lot to process.
It's a lot.
I didn't know about them shutting down part of the website because of it.
Yep. So big, grand consequences worldwide, trying to prevent more of these types of crimes from happening.
It's good they were taking it seriously.
Absolutely. I think it scared a lot of people because, you know, Craigslist was an avenue for sex work at the time.
For so many things, for anything back then. I think, I mean, people posted job listings, people posted
things
you know, it was like a little Facebook marketplace.
Personals, like
just,
a dating site.
Yeah, like if you, I saw this girl at this coffee shop. What was it? Missed Encounters? No.
Is it Missed Encounters? I know what you're talking about because I used to love reading those. I thought they were so romantic and sweet, and I always like wanted to imagine.
I mean, it was everything.
I wanted to imagine those people found each other and like went on a date that went really well. I always really loved reading the Misconnection.
Yes,
Misconnection. That's what it is.
We were close.
Okay. We were close.
Man, okay. So, the death chart. I found that he was found at 10:15. I'm not sure. We don't know exactly the time he would have passed, but he was pronounced dead at 10:15.
I imagine it didn't take long, and then I know that they did checks.
I'm sure they did
about
rounds.
every 30 minutes, I believe.
So it's probably not too far off, but we won't know if it's the exact time of passing. But even it being the time he was found dead is very interesting with the way that this lines up. And one thing as we were speaking, I didn't know when I pulled this chart that it had to do with his wedding date. But Pholus is at the part of his chart, which, you know, is connected to his North Node, his destiny, on his natal chart. On his death chart, it is in the spot of his Juno placement.
Oh, wow.
It is like nearly at the same degree. And it's retrograde, so it's like this internalized, excessive stress
chills.
On that. Yeah.
I have a lot of chills during this episode.
Yes. Also in Sagittarius on his death chart is Ceres, which squares off to the natal Ceres placement that I was speaking about earlier in Virgo. But there, for the death chart, is Mercury. So Mercury is in the opposite sign. We have a lot of oppositions for this death chart. We tend to have a lot of conjunctions and oppositions on death charts. I'm almost tending to think that like the way that he did it is just so oppositional in some way. That's why it reflected on that side of the chart rather than conjunctions. But for his death chart, I'll just run through it really quick. But those were highlights I had to get off of my chest like immediately.
Yep.
The sun was in Leo. The moon was in Scorpio. We have rising at Libra for 10-15. It looks like it would be like an hour-ish before it would have been in Virgo. So like I think it probably was somewhere in Libra at the time of death, unless they really just didn't check on him for a while. Virgo, we have Mercury, like I mentioned. We have Venus in Libra, Mars in Libra, Saturn in Libra, Jupiter in Aries. So this is a lot. There's the sun being in Leo is opposite his natal sun sign, and if you go by the noon chart, it's in the opposite house as well.
Wow.
So you know, the opposite sun sign here I think is huge, and Juno is in Leo with the sun here. Just to throw it out there, it is making a trine up to Pholus where his natal Juno is. Also, we have a lot of Juno stuff happening, so I'm not surprised that it connected so much with his would-be wedding. There's so many aspects. I had noticed them, but I didn't think much of them.
Right. I was excited to see how that lined up just based on the dates and knowing that the first time that he had that, well, it wasn't the first time, but like his second attempt was on the wedding day, and then the successful attempt was exactly a year and a day later, the day after the supposed wedding day. So something hits his chart each time that it comes around in those spaces, like again and again. So
yeah,
he's in that same mindset, but like ended his life successfully. I use the word successfully.
Right, and that makes a difference in
know.
astrology. Like attempts don't ring the same way,
right,
as an actual death.
We've seen it before where sometimes people have multiple death times where they'll be pronounced dead, but then they'll be revived, and then they officially die. And you see how the chart changes.
It shifts enough to actually let them pass.
Selena was one of those that I remember that we covered and had the 2 times, and like, things
go
lined
look at
up.
that episode if you haven't already.
Things lined up the second time where she was actually like, it opened up for passing.
Yes,
it was very interesting to see that.
It very much looks like what we have here. The Ceres placement being where his natal Uranus is in Sagittarius, I think that's this comfort in the chaos situation, making a trine down to the sun in Leo on the death chart, which also makes it's really a grand trine, makes another trine over to Eris, where his moon is in Aries with Eris. It's just, I feel like it's all so connected here with his death on this day here. There's like almost this feeling of absolution, or like a resolution to the trauma. Like the way he died, he was very like in the comfort that he couldn't have. Like, he had surrounded himself with that feeling that he had been wanting for so long.
So like complex when you really start to look at that. It was a very romanticized ending of the physical world. So it's really
we have the moon nearly opposing his natal moon, but it's in Scorpio. I guess there's a chance the moon, if it's a longer time before he died, that the moon could have been in Libra, like really opposing his natal moon. We have Mercury again opposing the sign, and would be the house of his noon chart. And I think the strongest oppositions being the sun and Mercury. We really see the sun as like the livelihood of a person, their whole body, their physicality, their vitality. That's the word I really wanted. Mercury being the kind of tends to be the voice, and then the upper body, like people connect the hands and the arms and the shoulders a lot with Mercury. So death by his own hand. We have his life, his vitality being taken by his own hand. I think that's really telling.
Wow.
Seeing that those are direct oppositions.
Other like kind of deeper layer here is the areas where he cut wrists and neck.
Yeah.
We're in those, so it's like it's the upper body. He did
And the
cut his
ankle
ankles as well,
ankle's connected to Aquarius.
Wow.
So I think it's very fascinating the way that lined out. I wish I could see more detail, obviously, but there's what else did I have here?
There's a lot going on.
I was looking a lot. Oh, I see what this was. Okay, the conjunction I told you to remember earlier.
Yes.
Okay. The main two, there was that one in Aquarius and that one in Sagittarius. Now, picture all those planets just coming down to hang out on one part of the chart for when he dies. Just all of those conjunction planets come right on down to Libra and Aries, where we have Venus, Mars, Saturn all together in Libra in the 12th house of the death chart. And then we have the other two, Uranus and Jupiter retrograde in Aries on the other side of the chart. Right on that cusp, hanging out right over that cusp. And of Aries and Pisces. These were the two major parts of his personality that have all come down and formed this huge, like when you look at this, it's a huge opposition.
Yeah.
It's square. They're all squaring off to the nodes at the time. This makes a huge square on the chart. And then looking at it more past that, the moon and the sun, the other placements I just talked about before this, also making this cross square with the nodes and these placements. It's all lining up. I can't remember what this is called. In the moment, I'm a little hazy today, but this is a very complex interaction on the chart with all these placements for his death chart. I think it's very telling how everything kind of comes together at the time of death, because some of these placements, it's just so odd to see them together for any long amount of time. It's not odd, but it's not as common, for this many planets to be all together, with some of them being fast-paced ones, with some being slow-paced ones. Mercury is about the same distance as it is on his natal chart from those placements. It's just very specific. And then we see the time he was found, the time he was discovered, where the horizon, that rising sign, that rising point is in Libra, where the big conjunction is. So this goes down to the minute, like when you go around the day, of all the times he was going to do it that day, potentially, it lined up where he was found dead at the time and dying at the time of the horizon point being at that conjunction in Libra. That's almost like you couldn't plan it any more specific. Yeah. I do think there's a lot of delusion here with the way his natal Neptune and transit Neptune interact with the death chart. When you look at them, you see natal Neptune conjunct transit Pluto and transit North Node, which is also an opposite kind of conjunction. He has Pluto on the South Node on his natal chart, where when he died, it was on his North Node.
Oh, wow.
And then, it just keeps going. Keeps going. Every time I looked at this again last night, it's like, oh, here's another thing. Oh, here's another thing. Let's see, where's transit Neptune again? Oh, transit Neptune was conjunct his sun, along with Chiron, both retrograde in Aquarius, at the end of Aquarius. It's not even just that they're in these signs. They're in the same parts of the sign, the same decans, same sections of these signs as his natal placements. It's so specific. So you see the Neptune Neptune placements sextile to each other, connecting his death and the way his view of the world was very affected and skewed by all the events happening, and how that was a major player in his suicide.
Yeah.
Pluto is literally death and major change. These on the death chart it is his 8th house.
What other house would it be? I mean,
I always look at the 8th house on these charts. We can't see his for real 8th house on the natal chart, but we can see it on the death chart. The North Node is transiting the 8th house, calling for a major transformation or death. The 8th house cusp and Neptune and Pluto all being together here are squaring his moon, where you see again the delusioned, harsh, unrelenting distress happening. There is a transit Jupiter and Uranus retrograde, also by his moon, giving this kind of sudden, big, unpredictable change.
Wow.
It's very harsh, very also giving like self-comforting.
Right. There was so much of that in. It's a very romanticized is the word that keeps coming to me when I try to think of like how to describe the way he planned all of this. It was very well thought out. He made sure he had the visuals to look at as he's, self-harming with the intent to end his life. And it's like he's just reflecting and escaping into those feelings. And like, it's so, it's so intense.
It's very, very intense. And I think Neptune is a very kind of romanticizing thing. People talk about Neptune and Pisces like rose-colored glasses and how you're choosing to view things around you. And, almost being isolated and lost at the same time, and going off into other like fantasies and different kind of realms in a way, dreaming. It's very kind of intuitive, spiritual as well. There's so much with Neptune, but the way that it lines up with Chiron and Pluto and the retrogrades and then the squares and the it's 8th house, like it's very romanticized death for sure. This is very in his own death, very kind of traumatic and delusioned. But I think it also kind of carried off on the way that it was perceived worldwide. Where it kind of handed us a taste of that too, like what the world is really like in these ways that we hadn't necessarily considered, because some of these platforms were so new.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Those are really my final thoughts right there.
Okay, guys. Well, wow. What an episode. What a way to come back.
What a way to come back.
Whew. That was intense. Thank you guys so much for being a part of what we do. Like we would probably talk about these things if you guys weren't here on the adventure with us, but we're just so glad that you guys continue to support us and stick by us even with breaks. Life happens, things happen, but we appreciate you guys. Please stay connected with us. Please like, follow, subscribe, make sure all of it. Join our Patreon if you want a little bit more. We have huge plans for Patreon in 2024. We both do personal readings. If you would like to reach out to us, you can find us everything on darkalignment.com or darkalignmentpodcast.
And linked in the description wherever you're watching. If there is a description where you're watching.
And we have merch available. We have these really cool stickers that say, "Let's chart this bitch." I have them on my car. I get compliments all the time. People want to know about it. So you can connect with us. We will see you very soon. We're going to be covering another really big case here shortly. So thank you so much. And remember, first and foremost, to continue to chart all the bitches in your life. And we will see you later. Bye.
Bye.